All right, welcome to our next video. We are going to cover the purchase agreement. I'm probably going to do this in several shorter videos so we don't make one 30 or 40-minute video. So please make sure that you get all the videos that are labeled purchase agreement. Obviously, the purchase agreement is the backbone of what we're going to be doing. It is probably the most intricate of all the forms to fill out. And we're going to go over probably about every line in this. So let's start with the top and see, when you fill out the purchase agreement, obviously you're going to be acting as the selling broker. All right. Notice it says company. That's where your company would go, and then your office code, by, and then this is the agent's name in this section here. All right. With your individual code. That would be your board code. For those of you in my board, that would be your my board code. All right. You would also put the listing broker, whoever's listing the property you're making the offer on. Now, maybe it's you. Maybe you're doing limited agency. So you would still go ahead and fill it out as your broker, their code, you as the listing agent, and your code again. If it's someone else, then you would look that up, and it would be on the listing or on the MLS. You would put the date of the purchase agreement. You would put the buyer. Now, the buyer would be all of the buyers. So if it's husband and wife, you would put two names, Bob Smith and Mary Smith. If it's a company, Real Estate Monkey, LLC, who the buyer is. The property would be known as, that's the generic street name, 12 Smith Street in Center Township, Marion County, Indianapolis, Indiana, and then the zip code 461, what is that, 46140? I don't know, 46101. And then a legal description. Now, the legal description does not have to be what you learned in class as far as the northwest quadrant of the northwest quadrant of the northwest quadrant. Most of the time on the MLS, it's going to have the generic name of the addition and lot. So, lot 7, Sherman Commons. That'll be fine in the purchase agreement because the title company will actually come up with the entire legal description. So you've ID'd the property right here. Now, it's also going to list some other things that are generically coming with the property. All of the existing improvements, unless they're leased or excluded at the end of, in the listing, if they excluded something, then obviously they would not be. And then it gives a list of a bunch of stuff that you might want to read. Sump pumps, water softeners, storm doors, mailbox, garage doors, all landscaping. And then if there's anything else that your client wanted, you would add that, like swing set, okay? There's a section called home heating fuel, which is fairly new, and I'm really not a big fan of that because there is no checkbox that says not applicable. It says the remaining fuel is included in the sale or will be purchased by the buyer within 5 days. Doesn't really say that heating fuel is not excluded. This would be for the farms that use propane tanks or something like that. Form agreement to determine the items that are excluded. So you have to use this form to exclude items not on the seller's disclosure, okay, or any multiple listing. I mean, if you advertise it in the MLS, it still has to be in here. All right, purchase price, dollars, and then spelled out. This blank right here, which I can't highlight, is spelled out. So you'd put $100,000, $00 and then spell out $100,000. Earnest money, $500 or $1,000 or $0, does not matter. Here's a new section that everybody's losing their mind over right now, this section here. Earnest money shall be delivered within so many days of the acceptance of the purchase agreement. Once the listing agent will act as the escrow agent unless otherwise stated in here. You could have the title company. You could say the seller's agent is going to, or the selling agent. I don't think that would fly very well. But it says if the buyer fails for any reason to submit earnest money, that he could, seller may terminate this agreement upon notice to the buyer. Upon notice to the buyer. Just can't terminate it. Section entitled disbursement has to do with the managing broker cannot disperse the earnest money out early for any reason unless there's a mutual release or unless the 60-day letter has been mailed or if it's going to the title company for the closing. Okay? Legal remedies. If the buyer fails to refuse, the seller incurs damages, he can retain legal right for all equitable remedies, which may include specific performance and additional monetary damages. All right. So if the buyer fails to perform for no particular reason, the seller can sue the buyer. All right. Page 2, method of payment. Obviously, cash is one method, new mortgage. Now, here is a section that has also brought some controversy, that when you apply for a mortgage and you're telling the other side what mortgage you're getting, if that mortgage type changes, theoretically, this purchase agreement needs to be amended. Because if I put conventional, which would imply that I'm putting 80% down right here, and then all of a sudden I need to go to FHA because I don't have the down money, that seller may say, oh, I would not have accepted that offer with such a high loan amount. So be careful when you're filling out the new mortgage section that you actually get the right kind of mortgage in there and that you just don't think, oh, I can switch over to an FHA now, or because if it was accepted as conventional and now you want to switch, you have to amend this purchase agreement because there could be a potential chance that the seller may change his mind based on the type of financing that you get. Specifically, if you originally put cash and now you're switching to mortgage, that would be a big decision by the seller. Then there's some other things here where we're not going to go into assumption of a loan, a land contract, or some other payment. I've only used land contract a couple times, and that requires a whole separate addendum and a video that we'll get. Time for financing. Now, in today's market, most people are already financed. So one of the tricks I write the word pre-approved right in here where it says I'm going to have so many days. I write the word pre-approved in this blank. And then I also write the word pre-approved in this blank. Now, sometimes if you've not got financing, you may give them 5 days to get acceptance of the agreements. They will make diligent effort. But I would say that most people are pre-approved in today's world. Closing date. This is the date you want to close. Make sure that you give yourself sufficient time. I mean, if you're cash, then you might be 10 days. If you're a loan, it might be 45 days. If you're an FHA loan, it might be 60 days. So make sure you give yourself enough time. But on the other side of that coin, you don't want to write close in 180 days because that may affect the seller's decision on your offer. Now, if it's something where you have to have 180 days because you're still in a lease on a purchase, still on a lease for an apartment, that may be true, then go ahead and write it in a case like that. But realize that may affect the seller's decision. Typically, I put, 60 days. So I put 60 days out from the date that we wrote the offer. If you got an offer up here on this date, I would then write 60 days in the time closing here. All right. Or within so many days after something. I like to write or within 5 days after final mortgage. So if my mortgage person gets done sooner, then we can close sooner. All right. If the closing date cannot occur due to any government regulation, the date of closing shall be extended for a period necessary to satisfy these requirements that do not exceed 7 business days. That could be like if the lender needs to relook at something that's a government regulation under the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, all right? The closing fee. The closing fee is the fee you pay the title company to do the work. Typically, it's shared equally is how I like it, all right? Now, if you're asking for assistance, make sure that you would check buyer, and that would be included in the assistance that you need, okay? Contingency. This agreement is not contingent upon the closing of another property, or it is contingent upon the closing of another property, and then you would put the address of, so if you're buying a house but you're selling your client's other house and it's contingent upon the closing of that house, you would put it is contingent, here's the property location, and the day that it is supposed to close, hopefully that date would be before this date up here so that they would have their money to close. Once again, this makes a decision on the seller if they want a house that is an offer that is contingent upon them selling another house. The good funds law just says that if there's more than $10,000, it's got to be wired. So make sure you tell your buyer client that when the final settlement statement gets to you, the closing disclosure, if it's more than 10 grand, it has to be wired to the title company, okay? When do you want possession of the property? Most common one, obviously, is at closing. If you're looking to let them have some post-closing possession, you could say beginning of the day or after, all right? Survey. A survey location report is a report that's already based on a survey that has been completed. If you're buying something that is an established house, like in one of the inner cities or in a housing addition, I would say a survey location report is sufficient. If you actually need a boundary survey where they come out and stake the corners, that might be you're buying farmland or development ground or something. You could also waive the survey. I would say that that probably would never fly because even the lender is going to want this up here. All right. And once again, the survey is paid for by the buyer if they're asking for allowance, shared equally, or the seller's expense. Flood area. If the property is located in a floodplain, there's 2 questions here you need to think of. The buyer may or may not terminate this agreement if the property requires flood insurance. Now, I almost always put may. I don't see how you could hurt yourself because may allows you the option to cancel it. All right? You may not, but you may. There's a second one here. The buyer may terminate this agreement is subject to building or use limitations of the location. So suppose you want to buy a house and you're going to cut hair out of it and they won't allow that. So you want the option to terminate just in case. Once again, I always put may terminate, may not, but at least I have the option. If I check the box entitled may not, then that pretty much puts me in a pigeonhole and I don't really want to do that. Home insurance, I always put 10 days. Why? Because my managing broker taught me that. Basically, when you close, when your buyer closes, they're going to have proof of insurance anyway. So typically they, have to have it at the closing table. So they might as well go ahead and get it. There's a section on environmental contaminants that it just says, hey, strongly advise that you seek other inspections if you think that there are like radon or mold or anything that might cause allergies, serious illnesses. We had a house that was infested with spiders, or we looked at buying a house. The inspection, once again, I do not ever see the advantage to waiving the right to an inspection unless your client is a rehabber and you're buying a property that you know is going to go get rehab completely redone. Maybe you'll waive it. I would still reserve the right. Personally, no matter who they are, you could always waive that right later if you decide you don't want to. But reserves the right is probably the best answer for that. Then you've got an inspection period. Now, typically, I want to put 15 days. The buyer has 15 days following the date of the acceptance to respond to the inspection report. So that means you got to get the inspection done and over to them. And the inspection is going to include all this other stuff right in here. Okay? I always write in the words that says and or the following. I always put as needed. I'm not an environmental person. Maybe my home inspector is going to suggest something that's not listed in this list. So I want the availability to have an inspection on anything. So I put and or the following as needed. Okay. Then it says if the inspection response has a presence of any other biological lead or any other condition that requires further examination. So like you need a radon expert or you need a roofing expert, you shall have an additional 15 days to get that. So I always love to put 15 days and an additional 15 days. Those two 15 days make up 30, which used to be the old closing day in 30 days. You certainly don't want to make your days longer than if you're going to close. So what I mean by that is if you're cash offer close in 5 days and then you have 15 days inspection and 15 days response, how are you going to close in 5 days if you've got 30 days potential of inspection? So keep that in mind when writing the closing date, that you've got inspection time frames in there, okay? Here's a section that says that the buyer does not comply with the inspection period or make written objection to any problems revealed in the report with the applicable time period, the property shall be deemed acceptable. So if you have an inspection report and you miss your deadlines, then the assumption is you're accepting those problems that you found, okay? Here's another question that always brings a lot of problems. If the inspection report reveals a defect, notice it's capitalized and bold. A defect means that would have significant adverse effect on the value of the property that would significantly impair the health or safety or future occupants of the property, or if not repaired, removed, or replaced, would significantly shorten or adversely affect the expected normal life of the presence. So things like I have seen people say, well, the window pane is cracked and fogging between the glasses. Well, does that really meet the definition of a word defect? Probably not. So that would be one that you couldn't get out of the purchase agreement claiming a defect of the broken window seal. The seller has the opportunity to remedy the defects to the reasonable satisfaction. So one of the big questions that's going on now is when a buyer finds a defect, they just want out of the purchase agreement. Actually, our purchase agreement says the seller has the right to remedy the defect to the buyer's satisfaction, okay? Buyer agrees that any defect disclosed or routine maintenance or minor repair items mentioned in the report shall not be the basis for termination. It's a strong paragraph, all capital letters. Once again, this goes to the fact of, fogged windows. That is probably not under the definition of a defect. Is the property going to have a home warranty? It will or will not to exceed, and I typically put $500 because that's about every warranty. And it's charged to the seller and ordered by the buyer. Now, sometimes the buyer, maybe you as an agent are buying your client a home warranty, so it's going to be the buyer and ordered by the buyer. Sometimes the house is already listed with a home warranty, so it may have been charged to the seller and ordered by the seller. Sometimes you may allow, if you're asking for a home warranty, you may allow the seller to pick the home warranty for you. I would always suggest giving our client the benefit. Here are the two disclosures. One is the seller's disclosure. It has been accepted, it has not, or it's not applicable. Remember, in some cases, it is not applicable. All right, same thing with the lead-based paint. Lead-based paint, it has been accepted, has not, and is not applicable. Lead-based paint is not applicable on any house that's built after 1978. Seller's disclosures aren't applicable for things like estate sales or sheriff sales or court ordered or things like that, okay? Bank owned fit in there as well. The title, this is funny, the title commitment for the most current and comprehensive title policy available. Basically what this is saying is, I'm not sure what I want, but give me the best one. So typically, I've never seen anything checked. I've never seen the abstract checked. Title insurance policy, give me the best one. Now remember, there's two policies. There's the owner's policy, which is typically paid for by the seller. And then there's the lender's policy, which is typically paid for by the buyer, which may be part of his allowance if he's asking for allowance. All right?